What if you could help others to find the power to heal themselves, physically, emotionally, and spiritually?
When I started teaching my classes, it was in 2002, and I was just doing the past life regressions and contacting the subconscious part. But then as the time went on and we found how powerful this was and what we could do with it, a lot of the students began saying, you know, advanced past life regression doesn't really tell what it's all about. This is so much more than that. We think you should change the name. So it was a few years ago we decided to change the name to Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique. And this is the healing technique that we've now been teaching it, well, since 2002, that's 12 years.
What if you could time travel with them, visit mythical places or angelic realms, other worlds, other galaxies? Help others to speak to their higher selves. You can. Dolores has taught thousands of people from across the world how to use QHHT, and now you can learn her method by going directly to DoloresCannon.com. And don't forget to mention the discount code MORETALKS.
Okay. All right, I want to welcome everybody. This is our third transformational conference, and it looks like it's going to be the biggest one yet. And I really appreciate everybody. Some of you have come long distances with the gas prices the way they are right now. I really appreciate that.
Crazy stuff that's going on.
I just came back from California, where in San Francisco the gas went from $4.17 to $4.37 in just one day. So they said that's what we're going to be getting because it starts on the coast and heads this direction. So that's not anything to look forward to. But anyway, I know the ones that had to drive, I appreciate you paying the gas to get here. And we were worried about the flights because of this big storm system that was headed toward the east. And I was sweating it out whether we were going to get our speakers here or they were going to be delayed.
But if they don't get here, guess what you get?
Okay, anyway, most of you know I'm Dolores Cannon. I'm the owner of the Ozark Mountain Publishing. And this is my daughter Julia. She is the brains of the outfit.
Now you know you're in trouble.
Okay. But this is our third one, and we started 2 years ago. The main idea was to showcase our authors. A lot of our authors have not spoken anywhere, and it's kind of helped them get their feet wet and get started to start doing lectures and till they can start traveling around. But also, there's nothing like this in this area. The only thing closer is the UFO conference we have in Eureka Springs, and I've been helping with that for 20 years. But there's nothing with the metaphysical, and so that's why we just started, you know, it goes away from the UFO.
There is ORI.
ORI, yeah, that's different. I shouldn't say this is not the only one. ORI is the Ozark Research Institute, and they give classes in healing and healing with your mind. So there is another one. But there hasn't been anything that was like a metaphysical type conference. And a lot of the local people have no idea what this is. So we're trying to educate them anyway and bring this into this area.
Well, and if I can say, we have a tremendous local response this year, so it's really happening. So I want to thank you for the locals that are coming.
So we're beginning to make an influence, I think. It opened people's minds and make them think. That's the whole idea of this, to get people thinking. And see, there's a lot more out there that they can explore. That's the whole idea. But we've got a lot of wonderful speakers. We had one cancellation, was Aaron and Doris Abramson. And if some of you were coming to hear them, they are wonderful, wonderful people. You know, he had been doing the psychic readings since the 70s. He had done over 7,000, taking people into the Akashic records. and we really wanted them to be here. We printed some of their books. But you know, he had a stroke, and he was here the first year, 2 years ago, and he had to learn how to speak and everything all over again, and he's in his 80s. And he said coming here gave him a whole new lease on life because he felt his life was over. And just coming before the audience again just gave him a rebirth. So I had him do several other things. This year, he was going to come and lead everyone through his procedure of taking him into the Akashic records. But he called us about a month ago and said both him and Doris, their health is failing very, very fast. So he didn't want to take a chance and cancel at the last minute, so he canceled a month ago. So those of you who know him, you know, I have a feeling if they go, they're going to go together because they've been together for so long, and Doris has helped him through so much, which is not a bad thing if they do decide to go. But we have a replacement that will be here, what is it, Sunday, who also has a procedure of taking people through to the Akashic records. So we'll be doing the whole room full, so you'll be able to make your own journey. So it's not Aaron, but somebody else is going to do the same thing. That's our only cancellation, unless my other speakers don't get here today. Okay, but I think that's most of what we were going to say, wasn't it?
Probably, if you've been out there, you're aware of the vending area. I just want to make sure you're aware that there's a vending area behind where the registration desk is and everything. Please support our vendors. They're wonderful people that keep coming year after year after year. They're wonderful with us and everything. So please support them.
Those who are staying at the hotel is giving free breakfast vouchers. And I said, anything is free, I love it. And that breakfast buffet is usually $7. So everyone who's staying here, make sure you get your free breakfast buffet vouchers so you can get free breakfast. Okay, I think, just the
logistics, no cell phones
come over
on.
here.
You can hear me, can't you? Oh, okay. That's right, loud mouth. No cell phones on. They have to be completely turned off because even the just vibration and thing interrupts with the DVDs and things that are the taping that's going on here. Restrooms are right out here. What else do y'all need to know? Ready to go? Okay.
Yeah, we're really glad we have Greg. He's a professional with this videoing, and he's done wonderful the last 2 years. So, yeah, don't let your cell phones interfere with what he's doing. He'll get mad, okay? Okay. All right, I guess that's it, and we're going to be starting. Our first speaker is one of our newest authors. It's Ron Chapman. And I had him on my radio show a few weeks ago. And if you probably don't know it, but with this company, I read all of the submissions that are sent to us. We get hundreds and hundreds of manuscripts submitted for publication. And it's difficult. I have to read everything that comes in. And then I decide which ones we're going to publish. And it's not very many. You can read 30 or 40 and find one that's interesting. So that's how we do this. And so the ones we have picked, we published during the year. I think we've done about 5 new books in the last few months. And we've got more coming up. So Ron Chapman has written a book that I think is going to really help you. The book is called Seeing True. And it has to do with, I think, changing your life. But he's going to tell you more about it. In the program, he said you've heard of What the Bleep and The Secret. His goes beyond that. Really how you can look within yourself to make changes and to change your life, really. It all really begins with you, and sometimes just the way you look at things. Does that make sense? Okay, so I'm going to let him take over because he knows how to promote his book better than I do. Yeah? Do what? Oh, the radio station, I have a weekly radio show. I've had it for almost 3 years. And it's on the internet, but it's called BBS Radio. That's Boy Boy Sam, bbsradio.com. And it goes all over the world. And my time is on Friday nights. I have an hour-long show every Friday night. And when I'm not there, like tonight, it's supposed to, they have archives. They have all the shows I've ever done are in the archives. It can be downloaded. People download them and listen to them in their car. And I'm always amazed. I'm sitting there in my front room talking to the wall, I think. And I go out places and they said, oh, we're all listening to them and we're downloading it. So it is going out there. But right before we left, there was on the email, it said, BBS radio is shut down right now because the fires in California have caused evacuation of Paradise, California, and that's where their headquarters is. So they said the fire has made them evacuate, so there's no shows tonight, probably the next couple of nights till they get that straightened out. It's at 7 o'clock our time. And it goes out live on that, but then you can always get the backloads on the archive. So it's funny, we got water over on this part, and then we got fire out there. I didn't think about them having their headquarters in Paradise, California. So everything is a state of flux right now. Your lives are probably too. Okay, well, I'm going to introduce Ron Chapman, the author of Seeing True. Okay.
I could reduce the price of gasoline, and that would really be miraculous. And she's right. So there was this minister, and he walked out of his house one morning to walk into the church, and he fell in step on the sidewalk behind a little boy pulling a red wagon, and about halfway up the block, all of a sudden, all four wheels fell off the wagon. Boom, just like that. The little boy turned around and he said, "Damn." And the minister thought, well, this is a teaching opportunity here. So he kneels down with the boy, and they're putting the wheels back on. At some point he says, you know, son, next time something really traumatic happens to you, you might want to say, thanks be to God. And the little boy looks at him funny, and he nods his head. They get the wheels on. The little boy thanks him. The minister appreciates it. The little boy begins to pull the wagon down the road, and the minister figures he'll follow along, just check up on the boy, and sure enough, half a block later, all four wheels, boom, just like that. Little boy turns, gets ready to say something. He checks himself, looks up at the minister and says, thanks be to God. And the wagon levitates. And all four wheels go back on. And the minister says, damn. Ministers love that story. The only place I couldn't get a laugh out of it was in a Lutheran church in Minnesota. They didn't think it was funny at all. But I'm not here to talk about that. It's actually a little bit of a setup. You know, humor is a funny thing. Humor is a sign of seeing differently. It's the punchline, right? That's how humor works. There's the punchline. There's the moment when you suddenly see it all differently and you laugh. Just like the proverbial aha moment, where all of a sudden things don't look the same. And this notion of seeing true that I'm here to talk about tonight is that kind of moment. It's that moment where everything changes. And I've come to this after a number of years, and I'll talk a little bit about what's in the book, although there's a few other things I want to talk about before I talk about the book. Because I had a series of those moments where everything changed. My whole life, everything about it, all the work I do. Some people don't know that because I haven't told them all about it. Not necessary for them to understand what's happened inside me. And I began to play with this idea of how can those things be completely different in an instant? How can our perception change so that it all changes, everything? Some of you know this story because you've had this in your life. In fact, a lot of you probably have, where all of a sudden something just like that. And all of a sudden something drops away. You find something new. A lot of us fall into metaphysical practices as a result of an instant. Something happens and now it's all different. And so my life has become a study of how that instant happens. That's all I do. I do it with my professional work. I have a consulting practice. I am a professional speaker. I do a whole bunch of work with organizations and leadership and coaching, all this kind of stuff. And it's all about that moment. And the reason it's all about that moment is because I know that everything we're seeking depends on that moment. That moment when it all becomes different, when everything opens up and it all becomes possible. And what I've found is that, in fact, those moments are replicable. We can have them happen over and over again. So that's what I'm actually here to share with you tonight, is about how that can happen. But in order for me to talk about that, I need to tell you a little bit about some of the study I've been doing, and I'm going to pass some of these around. These are yours to take. They're done up as beautifully as I could figure out how to have them done up. This is the Seeing True Flow of Spirit. I'm going to go ahead and hand a few more, and you all can pass them back. There should be a few more there, sir. A few more here. Go ahead and take one, pass them on back. Because if it's true, I guess I might as well just throw a few more back here. They're all coming back. I swore to my sound guy I wouldn't get in front. I'd just go ahead and pass them on back. So the basic idea was, okay, if these aha moments are replicable, if they're repeatable, if we can reproduce them, then there must be a way that spirit, my word for whatever it is out there that's working, there must be a way that it reliably operates. And mostly we spend a lot of time getting little glimpses of it. In fact, my mentor, a very spiritual man from Texas, there are such people in Texas.
Yes,
There are, there we go. So you can always get away with a Texas joke too. Sam says that what happens is we all get these little slivers of the truth with the capital T. And the mistake we make is we presume that little sliver to be all of it. Anybody here read Ken Wilber? He wrote a book called The Theory of Everything. Ken Wilber calls that flatland. He says what we do is we take this reality, this spiritual universe that is immense and deep and rich, mysterious, all these things in it. And what you and I do as humans is we take a little sliver of it and we say, aha, that's it. You see, the truth about the whole universe is this little piece that I've seen. And so what I've been taught is that in fact the truth is adding up all those slivers and all the ones that we can't see, to add up to this rich, deep, complex, mysterious, unknowable, and unknowing universe. And the secret to being able to see a little bit of that is we have to let go of our certainty about our little sliver. And yet still, some of those little slivers make a lot of sense. In fact, my guess is whatever your little sliver is makes a lot of sense to you. That's why you like and are attached to your little sliver. That's why when someone says to you, well, your little sliver might not be the whole piece, you get defensive. Or at least I'm presuming you're a lot like me when someone says, as they do with this beautiful illustration, they look at it and they go, well, let me tell you about what's wrong with your little sliver, right? And my ego, y'all got an ego, right? My ego goes, oh, I'm offended because you're attacking my little sliver of reality. But I do want to start here before we jump into the big reality. The basic proposition here is that there's an infinity of spiritual demonstration. It includes everything. There's nothing that isn't there. It's endless. Completely undefinable. We get little pieces of it. Sometimes we get very, very good insights, but there's more than we can imagine. And it flows. How many of you have enjoyed either What the Bleep or The Secret? That's right. Yeah, Julia was telling me that this audience would be filled with lovers of those. Well, those are one little sliver too. And what they're a sliver of is what is below this dotted line on here, what I call the responsive aspect of spirit. Some would call it cause and effect, right? The world where everything is responsive. And The Secret and What the Bleep and all kinds of metaphysical practice is involved in trying to understand how to make that stuff behave. We want our lives to line up and to add up. We want things to work right. Well, one mystic says that what we do is we spend all our time trying to figure out how to get new and improved fish in our nets rather than leaving our nets. That's what humans do. And so this whole world of the metaphysics oftentimes becomes a trap for many of us because we get attached to this one little way of seeing how it is. And that's been my experience with it. If it's true, and I offer it as a question, that in fact the universe in the world of cause and effect is 100% responsive 100% of the time, then your reality is absolutely perfect right now. It may be painful, it may be unpleasant, it may be beautiful, it may be wondrous, it may be mysterious, it may be leading you towards an early death, It may be taking you into heretofore unknown realms, but it's absolutely perfect because the proposition in the realm of cause and effect, where most metaphysics happen, is that it's all perfectly responsive. Spirit can't not respond. Spirit's designed to respond. Let me give you an example. Who here knows how to breathe? Show of hands. Okay. Are you sure you know how to breathe? You're sure? Okay. If I were to ask you to describe the millions of small neuromuscular transactions that take place that allow you to breathe, you would perish from lack of oxygen. Right? The Sufis had a story about this. The Sufi story was, first I believed I was the dancer. Then I came to believe I was dancing, only to find that I was being danced. First I thought I was the breather. Then I thought I was breathing, only to find that I was being breathed. That in fact, deep in the old brain, the part that was there before the new brain wrapped itself over it, deep in the new brain is something like, universe, it's valuable to breathe, and Spirit breathes us. If I ask you now, everybody raise your hands. Some of you are not cooperative. That's fine. All right? We'll talk about that in a minute. In the raising of the hand, you thought you did that. My proposition to you is that, in fact, a suggestion was offered. You thought it had value. Some of you didn't. Right? And Spirit, in response to your perceived value, said, raise your hand, son or daughter. And we think we're the doer. We think we did that. That's the human ego structure. Ask you to switch a light on or off. We think we know how to do that. But again, if we had to figure it out, not a chance. You could never explain it to anybody. The human ego structure is such, it's embedded in the world of cause and effect that presumes I'm the cause and that's the effect. Right? I'm the one who flips the light switch and I can produce an effect. It's like the little kids. You'll probably have seen this with your little kids. When a little kid looks at things and he says, I can do that. I can make that happen. That's the egoic structure coming to believe that it's the doer. It's built into the human system. So we walk around all the time, and this is called, on this diagram, Spirit's response to the unconscious. We are being breathed by a spirit that is responding to an impulse in us that we do not even know of. That's why when you go to sleep tonight, you won't die. Spirit will continue in response to deep programming, will continue to respond all night long so that you wake up tomorrow. Or you might not. Death may occur, and we don't know what that is. Whatever it is, that stimulation, that thing that causes a response, goes away. It vanishes. Spirit is response. It's happening all the time. It can't not happen as long as we're alive. It works the same way toilets work. I realize you didn't know you were going to be talking about toilets tonight. Toilets, as long as there's gravity, work. As long as there's life in our bodies, that deep programming works. Spirit responds. Spirit can't not respond. It has to, all the time. And we don't know about it. In fact, we think we're the doer. So that's a responsive universe. Now there's another kind that a lot of us spend a lot of time with in this Spirit's response to misperception. I'm going to read you something from my book so you get a sense of what's in here. This is a story about a woman I did some work with. It's entitled Small. And by the way, the book is a journal book. It's a workbook. I present a story, a vignette, a picture. I ask a question, and I ask you to think about it. Because exactly what Dolores was saying is absolutely true. We're here to think. Now, most of us don't know that. We spend a lot of time not thinking. So here's the story. Molly played small. It may have been an infantile survival tactic, but it fit with the part of her that was still an infant despite her actual age of 28. Molly's story was a common one. Her father had been domineering and hypercritical of her as long as she could remember. Nothing she had ever done was adequate, and his voice had taken full-time, rent-free residence in her mind. Her father's abusive comments had become hers. Her conditioning had likely been established very early in life, though it had adapted over time to be more socially workable. Still, you could see it in her posture, shoulders rolled slightly forward in self-defense and a slight downward and deferent angle to her chin. The accounts of her life were filled with self-condemnation and strategies to minimize her exposure to criticism. In total, they were a strategy of smallness in response to a terrifying foe. There came a day when Molly was able for the first time to shake off her fears. It was initially very brief, but grew over several years until the day came when she threw back her shoulders and exposed herself to the world. In that moment, a glorious Molly emerged. She was fully herself, and the possibilities terrified her. She shrank again, but only for a while. She could no longer deny herself. So it is with all of us. Smallness gives way to our own wondrous reality. Spirit shines forth, and we are finally home and whole. Molly is a perfect demonstration to Spirit's response to misperception. Molly, because of her childhood experience, was frightened. And what do you suppose Spirit does when the inner voice from deep in here, not here, this is why affirmations can be dangerous ground for a lot of us. We'll talk about that in just a moment. From deep in here, Molly's report was danger, 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 danger. And she was like this as a result. Her life was like this. I worked with another guy by the name of William, who was very tall and built about like me, who was meek as he could be for the same reason. So what was happening was this glory that wants to demonstrate can't get out because there's a report going on from deep in our soul, deep in our heart, saying danger, 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 danger. And we play small. In fact, the question I ask on the other side of the page is, how do I play small? And provide room for you to answer that question. That's a response to misperception. In fact, let me read the dedication in this book. For those of you who know Stephen Levine, who wrote quite a lot of really remarkable stuff, Stephen Levine said, as soon as I find it, Stephen Levine said, "We seek not just that which is uninjured, but that within us which is uninjurable." We are uninjurable. We can't be touched. And yet the ego structure is such that it convinces us that we can be harmed. And in response to that, held deep in here, many of us play small. Spirit responds perfectly. Spirit says, okay, if you think it's dangerous, I'll help you not be exposed. That's why people who have to speak oftentimes say they'd rather die than get in front of an audience. That's fear. And Spirit says, I'll protect you. Spirit is responding. Any place you're having hardship or difficulty in your life is the response of a loving Spirit to a belief held in your heart, not in your head. Now, what's useful, anybody here do affirmations? Any of you have trouble with affirmations? It works for all of you all the time? Some of you are shaking your heads, of course not. I know that because they didn't work for me sometimes. That's because, imagine this, why would someone who has beliefs, why would somebody talk about, for example, having wealth if they did not believe that they were in poverty? So up here we're saying prosperous, 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 prosperous. Down here, what do you suppose the message is? Poverty, 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 poverty. And Spirit responds accordingly. For some of us, affirmations can be very slippery territory because every time I utter the affirmation, I'm reaffirming what's held down here. And Spirit's responding perfectly. All the time, 24/7, no exceptions. Very consistent with what was talked about in What the Bleep, a lot of metaphysical practice, is that it's all perfect response. And of course, you might want to get curious. If you're having a rocky road, you might ask yourself the question, why is that? Because if it's true, and I offer this as a proposition for you to consider, I was taught that if all I do is accept someone's ideas, without hammering them out on the anvil of my own experience. I'm simply being gullible. If it's true that spirit is responsive 24/7, no exceptions, then whatever rocky roads we're encountering are perfect based on what's going on in there. And the only response is to get curious. Now, as we get curious, we get over here further on, Spirit's unobstructed response, right action. Now, if you've studied Buddhism, you know that right action is very, very elevated in terms of principle. Mostly my ego attaches to that. Right action is a more appropriate, you have that same experience, you were laughing, yeah. I get very attached to doing the right thing. In fact, there's these sayings about do the next right thing. Oh boy, my morality ego jumps all over that and turns into all, I mean, I've done a lot of damage trying to do the next right thing. I mean, really, to be really honest. But as we begin to debug these things, Molly was a good example. When Molly stopped report, when she finally named that she held this fear, the fear dropped and literally you could see her posture change. Spirit drew her up in response to the diminishment of the inner report. And she did, just like you didn't have to think about laughing about that really great joke I told. That's, yeah, okay, a couple of you, yeah, thanks. Spirit did not need her to think, I need to pull myself. When she first stopped report, we were sitting at a table at a Wild Oats in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And when she got a look at it, literally, she went like this, without a thought. The dissolving of the held idea within us. This is the realm of metaphysics. And we spend a tremendous amount of energy trying to figure that stuff out. It's built into us. We apparently are figuring out kind of people. In fact, somebody said that because in human form, for millions of years, we have been trying to figure stuff out. That's our first response is, let me figure out how I can use this and make some things work better. So many of us, myself included, spend a lot of time in the metaphysical realm trying to get everything to line up, behave, and be proper like we know it's supposed to be. That's what I do. In fact, I have to tell you the funny story. Dolores will perhaps remember this. I hope you do, because it was a great moment for me. When I wrote my first book, I exhausted myself. I proved to myself that when you get those reports that people have been admitted to hospitals because they're exhausted, they really are. Well, sometimes they're having drug problems, but sometimes they really have exhausted themselves, because that's what I did with my first book. I went out and, I was pushing it, and there came this day where I could not get off my couch. I was wasted. Truly, I was wasted. And I felt like I ought to do something, so I said, well, yeah, at least turn on the TV. And the inner response, I think it was a spiritual response, was, no, stop it. Okay, well, I'd at least get up and get something to eat. No, just sit. Well, I need to at least take a shower. No, this happened for several days. The message was, stop it. Stop it. Well, what came out of that was an understanding of what I call my performance programming. It runs very, someone's laughing up here, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That I must do something, I must do it well because the universe depends on me for it, which is kind of a way of elevating me to the role of God, a place I sometimes really like. So I sat, and this thing began to dissolve. And so when I got my second book done, I immediately thought, I know what to do now. I know 50 places I can take this to, and I'm gonna... And I said to myself, stop it, Ron. Stop it. That was part of my misperception. Spirit was going to give me the energy to run around and exhaust myself again. So I said, no, I'm going to leave it on a shelf. And for those of you who are writers, you know that leaving anything you've written on the shelf is a painful proposition because you want it to find a home. But I said, no, I can't do that. I've got to wait. So one day my publicist, who had been at a conference in Florida, called and said, I think I got the right place for you. Send it to Ozark. Okay, great. And then I watched my little egoic brain say, now it's time to send it out to 50 publishers and begin to blah, 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 blah. I said, no, stop it, Ron. One publisher. Just one. And I sent it in. And I included some suggestions on the cover art. You probably remember that, Dolores. That was my ego trying to help. Well, about 6 or 8 months passed, and I called Dolores, Finally, I said, okay, it's time to call. I called Dolores and I said, so Dolores, Ron Chapman. She goes, oh, we love your book. We love the content, but you know, these aren't quite your words, Dolores, you know, your suggestion on the cover art's really awful. And we know how you authors are, so like I've been kind of afraid to call you for fear that you'd be upset that we don't like your cover art. And I said, you do the cover art. See, I'm the unique author who has written a book, sent it to one publisher, and been accepted, which is very rare. It's because I stopped what I was doing. I waited for the way to be shown, and the way was shown. But I couldn't keep my ego out of it. I wanted to make sure that Dolores said yes, so I had to help out with the cover art, which slowed it down by 6 months. There's my ego. So it's a beautiful example, and thank you, Dolores, so much for liking my work and for publishing it. It's a beautiful example of how those things creep in. And when I got out of the way, right action happened. I didn't have to do anything for all intents and purposes. So, when we leave the realm of the responsive aspect of spirit, we find ourselves in the realm of the initiative aspect of spirit. This is the realm of miracles. This is where stuff just happens. This is where doors get opened effortlessly. Literally, where we sit and wait. Let me read you a piece here, because this one usually agitates people, which agitation is a good thing. You knew that, right? Yeah, that's how I feel about it too. Well, I don't have it handy right here, but the basic gist of this is, any of you who've studied the Course in Miracles know there's a great section in there that says, and I quote, I need do nothing. And almost everybody, when they read that, starts getting real agitated. Usually with things like saying, well, we all know that God helps those who help themselves, right? And if I don't do anything, it's like what, asking God to pop a hot dog through the keyhole? There's all these things that come up because we think we're the doer. So here's the proposition I'm here to talk about, and I'm going to tell you why my book is helpful with this. If in fact we can stop doing because we believe in cause and effect, things start happening that we could never predict, that we could never control. Miracles, remarkable things. But the only way that can happen is when we, with our egos, stop it. Seeing true takes place effortlessly in my framework. But the last thing in the world our egos want to do is stop doing things. I mean, my God, it might not turn out like we want it to. Right? So the proposition I'm offering for you is that we spend a tremendous amount of time trying to get everything lined up because we believe in cause and effect. And all the mystics of the ages were talking about the realm beyond cause and effect. That was their message. That was the teaching. All mystical traditions are about moving out of the realm of cause and effect. And the amazing thing is, I haven't figured this out yet. I'm hopeful that it's going to become clear to me. I made a commitment this year I was going to start talking about this subject. Because the thing I have noticed is most of the people in mystical traditions talk from the light while we're in the swamp. Right? The human condition we're bogged down. That's where we are. That's what our life is. All that's happening all the time. All those relationship problems and kids that don't do what they're supposed to and paychecks that don't work the way they're supposed to, and then you got medical problems. We're like stuck in the swamp. And yet all the mystics of the ages talk from the light. They tell you, at worst, they tell you that your experience of cause and effect is an illusion. And most of us are offended by that proposition because my illusion hurts. Right? Yours does too, I imagine. And so I've been asking the question, consistent with this framework, why do they all teach from the light? Since all the good work I've seen done in the work I've been a part of has been by joining people in the swamp. Because when you're in a swamp, you need help figuring it out. This is help figuring it out. I'm here to talk today about how we get out of the world of cause and effect. We don't have to get to the initiative aspect. The initiative aspect is waiting for us when we drop this, when we, quote, abandon the self, when the egoic structure stops having a hold on us. This divine order finds us. Now, the biggest challenge is, if you think you're the doer, you can see the mischief already. The assumption is there must be something I can do to get me up to this place of miracles and wonder, the place where amazing things happen. That would be the problem. There's not a doing that will get you there. The only thing we can do, as best I can tell it, and I'll give you a couple examples of this, they're very human examples. When we see it, when we see the block in the eye, as Jesus called it, the block is removed for us. Our task is simply to see it. Our only function is to see it. It is done for us. It's removed for us, and we are moved forward effortlessly. Not without some discomfort, because every block I've had removed has been uncomfortable. One of my less than glorious ones, I had a long history. I have successfully completed 2 marriages. That doesn't work in Lutheran churches either. In fact, I'm not invited back to Lutheran churches anymore. In the second marriage, I realized that I badgered my wife a tremendous amount. And I spent 8 years working on that. My mentor and I, and it was brutal. As all of you know, as you've tried to correct some of those things in you, it was just brutal. I hated how I behaved, and yet I was powerless to stop doing it. So I banged away at it and banged away at it and banged away at it. And there came a moment, it was literally when my head hit the pillow one night next to ex-wife number 2. My head hit the pillow, and like that, all that work added up. And what happened was, the thought raced through me. Maybe it was a spiritual thought, don't know. It said, this doesn't work. Nagging her. It's never worked. It's never going to work. All it does is irritate her terribly. And then I feel really, really awful. I don't want to do this anymore. Gone. Perfect spiritual response. I was popped out of the obstruction. The block was removed. All I had to do was to see it in all its awful glory. That's been the story that I have been after, this seeing true moment. Not just in me, I've seen it in others. I've been privileged to work with others who've had the same experience. I got to tell you briefly about my friend Art. Awful crack addict. Awful crack addict. It was horrible. How he didn't kill himself, I don't have any idea. There came a moment in Art's walk where he finally got it. He's like become this remarkable man. If you met him today, you would say, not possible for him to have been like that. He has been transformed. And I got to watch that happen. We call them miracles. They're remarkable. We don't understand them. The addiction fields are full of these stories of people getting popped out of awful things. And the secret is when we get to the moment where we really, 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 really see the truth, then Spirit moves to remove it and we pop up the line. And if we do that enough, we find ourselves up in a place where things happen that we can't predict and certainly can't understand. So a tool like my book, Seeing True, or like some of the things we're going to talk about now, because I should have ample time to chat, because I learned something as a speaker. If all I do is talk at you, you're all going to go to sleep and you're going to get bored. So we're going to talk. We're going to interact here. That does justice to you and why you're here. Tools like this and tools like others, and people who practice healing work. A lot of you know that like physical healing, we were actually talking about y'all's practice in this. Lots of times, that's the thing that produces the catharsis that causes the thing to move, and when the thing moves, things change. It's the same, so many healing modalities. It's like, I've tried a bunch of them. Some of them worked, some of them didn't. They all ended up with things moving. Prayer worked because things moved, ultimately. Although it took a lot of prayer sometimes. So a tool like Seeing True is to get you to start asking the question, what is the block in my eye? If it's true, here's my proposition. If it's true that you are getting a perfect response from Spirit 24/7, no exceptions, the only proper response is, well, gee, I wonder how that's happening. I didn't think I was asking for this bit of hardship or this bit of difficulty, but if that's true and we start experimenting with it, we start asking the question. We start thinking, we start contemplating. Meditation takes us there. And things begin to dissolve and begin to get removed. Or we get these suggestions like, go see so-and-so who does craniosacral work. Right? And we go and something happens. Over and over and over again. And eventually where that leads is out of the realm of the metaphysical, out of cause and effect. If we can let go of our attachment to the world of cause and effect, the belief that I'm the doer, which runs very deep in me, there's a whole other realm that we have available to us. And people don't talk about it a lot because we're real interested in how to make it all work. That's the metaphysical realm, and it has great value. It's a necessary part of the process. But it's not the end point. If all we do is stay in our metaphysics, we miss the next incarnation of Spirit through us. And it has the potential to change the world if we can get out of the way, which is kind of hard for me. Probably hard for you. Now what I'd like to do is see what you're thinking. It's much more important to interact than for me to talk at you. And I saw your hand up just a moment ago. I actually have a microphone for you. I had a microphone for you. Dolores, you took the microphone. Well, I can probably hear you, but I'd like to make sure that everybody else can hear you too. So we're going to go ahead and put you on a microphone, because we all know that people would rather die than speak in front of a group. If you could pass that over to me, please. Okay.
Your friend Ark, did you have anything to do with his transformation? And number two, are we the doers here, or are we here to help bring on the miracles for the others?
Okay, let me take the first one. I would say that I had no hand in Ark's experience. What I would say, I like the midwife metaphor. I got to catch him. That was it. I participated in the discussions with him because he was in the swamp, deep in the swamp. We had to spend a lot of time in the swamp together. I couldn't talk him out of the swamp from on high. I had to join him in the swamp and wade through the swamp with him. So what I did was I waded through the swamp, and his miracle came about. I was with him, which may be the greatest, that may be one of those great commandments, right? Just be with them. Just be with them. As far as maybe what we're here to do, big quotes around to do, maybe it's nothing more than to awaken. Maybe the doing will get done through us if we can learn the lesson of stop it. That seems to be my experience right now. I'm doing a lot of stopping it right now. So that may be our purpose in being here. Something for you to play with. Did that precipitate another question, or?
It's just kind of funny. I'm a nurse. I think I was born one. And I have always had this caring need, but when I was in nurses training, you had to have short hair. I had long hair, so I wore a wig, and you always wore a nurse's hat.
Uh-huh.
And so the hat was pinned to a wig, and I thought, okay, I am not receiving what I need to be receiving, because I feel like I really do have a gift. And so I was in talking with, when I was having kind of a physical one day with my doctor, and he just, all of a sudden, when I went to leave, you know, because this was in the middle of a conversation, took my head and just ripped off the wig and the hat. And he did not know that I was going to be hypnotized to get the wig and the hat out of the way. But I have since realized that the nursing part of me has been there for a very long time. I can't, it's not going away.
Okay, here's what I would suggest, because I actually did some work with a nurse, and nurses are deeply attached to nursing. You know that. They are. Like doctors are deeply attached to doctoring. I make up words. My daughter told me that when I wrote this book. She said, I can't edit this. You make up stuff all the time. The nurse I was working with, the place we got to was I said, let God do the nursing through you. Stop being the nurse. Be the transparency for it to pass through you. Drop your identification. And it changed her practice. It changed her practice because she got out of the way and let the nursing happen. I did the same thing with an attorney who was all twisted up around his lawyering. He's all twisted up around it. Stop being the lawyer. Let God do the lawyering. You just be the instrument. You hold the pencil so that God can do what needs doing. Get out of the way. And again, it changed his experience. He stopped being the doer, and it changed it all. So what are you thinking about? Thank you. Good question. What are you thinking about? What are you challenged about? What's your little brain saying, that sounds all well and fine, but I think it's nonsense, Ron? No? Who's got a challenge they'd like to share? Anybody here got a block in their eye? Raise your hands. Who'd like to talk about a challenge? Here's the microphone.
Do I really need one?
Absolutely, Barbara. They need to hear you.
My challenge is I've always been a giver to everyone else but myself, okay? So about 3 weeks ago, my son acquired a new wife. She has made her life now and mine miserable by calling her mother-in-law 8 to 10 times a day and just absolutely interfering with my life. And how can I, as a giver, say no to her? You know,
So how do we stop being the caretaker?
How do you stop being used by everybody whenever you feel like
You're
that's
saying
your,
a little closer to your mouth.
when you feel like that's your, when you feel like
There you are.
And there I am.
Yeah.
When you feel like that's part of what you are is the person that's a giver. But she's just driving me nuts. And I just love her to death. But
Well, like
what do you
the
do?
nursing example, that's not to say you don't have giving in you. The mischief comes in becoming identified with it. Right? I'm doing some work with a woman, she's actually referenced in the book here, who had a remarkable experience of seeing a visual portrait of herself when she was a little girl. We'd been doing a bunch of work, and she saw herself sitting in her mom's arm, and her mom was showing her off to all of her friends. And she got tears in her eyes, and she said, "There's something really wrong about that, Ron." And I said, "So tell me about that." And in her case, what it was her early identity as a child became formed around being there for her broken mom. So she has spent her life being responsible for others. That's what she does. Well, up until recently, she has had to do exactly the things we're talking about to examine that, and it was held in her heart, not in her head. It was held very deeply. It was painful for her. And she needed to get it out, and she's been getting it out. And what's happening now is the most amazing thing. She and I were just talking, today's Friday, right? We were talking Wednesday. And she was lamenting how hard some of this is. And I said, so step back for a moment and tell me about the people in your life. She goes on to tell me this story. And the story is that Spirit is delivering non-needy people into her life, and the needy people are disappearing. Formerly, she had, I don't know, a couple dozen very, very dependent people in her life. She's got 3 left. And she's got 10 people who have no needs of her. And her response was, she said, I didn't even see that. I didn't realize that my reality, here's the story. when she did the work and began to get out of her way, Spirit began to reconstruct her life. And now she's being surrounded by these people who don't require her to play that anymore. But she had to do that inner work. So when Dolores was saying, this is an inner proposition, that's part of it. The block in our own eye. And the way, it's a beautiful design. Sometimes it's unpleasant. The design is, if it's not changing, you still got a block in your eye. If it's changing, the block is being removed. So if you want to know where you're at, look at whether or not it's different. If it's not different, you still got a block. It's an awful design, but it's a perfect design. If you're experiencing discomfort, it's information from Spirit, from the universe, that you got a block in your eye. And you inquire, I wonder what that block might be. So, yes, and you have a little bit of inner work to do, and by the way, don't feel bad. All of us do. All of us do. It took me about 10 years to get the performer done as it is now. And all of a sudden I find myself doing work that I hadn't planned on doing. There it is again. That's what happens when we get out of the way, we're drawn up the curve. And the only way we can do that is by identifying the block in our eye, and it will be removed or dissolved. Who's got a question? Please.
Am I understanding you correctly in that you're making an simile or a comparison of spirit to ego?
I would say that ego, well, it's all spirit, so ego must be part of the design. But in fact, what I would say is that we think we're doing things that we aren't doing. Spirit, in fact, is animating everything, because there's nothing but spirit. And the ego attaches to that and thinks it is the it. This is what the mystics of the ages have told us, right? About leaving the self behind. Did that?
My reason for bringing this up is because essentially what you're saying is an awful lot like what Eckhart Tolle is saying in his book, The New Earth.
It's very similar. Yes.
And you know, he's saying our biggest stumbling block is our ego.
Yes. Yeah, the ego believes in itself to the exclusion. It attaches to itself and makes up story. We're story-making creatures. We see a thing, there's a great book called The Black Swan by a guy whose name I can never remember. He's a Lebanese guy. He says what happens is things happen, we make up stories, and we believe our stories. Now, if you go back to that first proposition, that this universe is deep, it's rich, it's mysterious, it's undefinable. And what my ego does, my ego looks at it and goes, aha, I know what's going on here because I can manage this deal. Blocks out all the rest of the possibility. He talks about like history being a construction of egos. We don't really know what happened. Anybody have this experience with their kids where you've been wondering what's going on with them because they get into whatever mischief or trouble they get into, and then one day you get to glimpse it, and if you're really honest, you go, I still don't have any idea what's going on? If you're really honest? I mean, they say that one of the great wisdoms is, I don't know. I don't know, I need help here, I can't see it. But the ego thinks it knows. The ego creates stories. The ego attaches. It turns us into the nurse or the helper or the speaker. The last things I do before I try and speak is I try real hard to drop that. And one of the reasons as I say, I blow the whistle, I tell the truth about myself, some of my ugly stories, because it keeps me honest. Because before very long, I'm going to start thinking it's all about me, because y'all are all looking at me. My ego is going to say, it's about you, Ron. That's what it will do. And I'll become the speaker, which is why it's also important to ask you what you're thinking, which is, what are you thinking? What's on your mind? We've got a few minutes before I have to wrap this up. Much more important to hear what you're thinking. The wisdom here is not me, the wisdom here is you.
Thank you. Is this on? Oh, yeah.
Yes,
Thank you very much for all you've been showing us. I've been studying how to move beyond into the spiritual level, and I've realized that ego has been running my life for a long time, and then I began to realize that I could recognize when ego was trying to get me to do things, and I realized that ego's fault or flaw, no, ego's character is it must be in control. It must be in control. But the difference in the spirit, the creative spirit, is it is in control. And if we can see the difference, I mean, that's changed my life. So I want to thank you for what you've told us today.
Well, thank you. And again, I'm going to tell you a real honest story. I consider myself in recovery from relationship addiction. And it's embarrassing to admit it. Thank you. Thank you. But I have to tell you how I saw it. The seeing it coming thing, the seeing true. I'd gone on, I won't tell you how much work went into this. It was awful. It ended up with me being at a place in Wickenburg, Arizona, where they treat relationship problems. Inpatient treatment, that tells you it was pretty bad. Did my work, came out, I got this deal figured out, right? So I go visit my mentor in Texas, and we're out at this social function, and there's this woman I'm attracted to. So I go over and I talk to her, and she proceeds to tell me, it was a horrible story of her child dying recently, different fathers for her children, no means of support, and I am aware of how attracted I am to her. The helper you were talking about? My pattern, my relationship addiction pattern, was to choose really, really, really profoundly broken women so I could put them together so my ego could think it had performed sufficiently. So I picked in this group, it's a big social function, I picked one of the most broken women available in the city of Austin, and promptly, I could feel it in my body. I could feel it coming. And she told me this story, and I said, it's very nice to meet you, Teresa. Have a nice evening. And I went over to my mentor, and I said, let me tell you what just happened to me. And I told him the story, and he goes, so what do you want to do? I said, I think we should get out of here. This is a dangerous place. I had to see it coming. I had done it. That's why I have 2 ex-wives. That's why my history is littered with relationships that became very, very mischievous. Just littered with them. Because the only way you can play fixer is to pick someone who believes they need fixing. The more you want to play fixing out, the more they have to be broken. Okay, there you go. Yeah, I have a friend who refers to himself as he practices serial marriage. And he's up to number 9. Yeah. So, but that's, you have to feel it and see it. And it was visceral. It was in my body. It wasn't in my head. And what happened, the spiritual response was when I finally saw it, I have not been attracted to someone like that since. Try what? So the thing is, when you finally see it, you don't have to change it. Spirit changes it for you. But if it hasn't changed, it's proof you haven't seen it. It's a perfect design. It's a beautiful design. It's just sometimes an ugly design. Because sometimes what it takes for me to see the truth is not pleasant or comfortable. But that's the way the design is. If it's a rocky road, ask the question. Somebody back here has a question.
Oh, this is just to support what you're saying. I followed Deepak Chopra for several years, and I used to hear him say things that other people didn't hear, but he said there is transformation in observation.
Absolutely.
There is transformation in observation, and
So
I'm just reiterating what you're saying, that this is so true.
Right. What supports observation is being willing to go there, to get curious. The number one take home for tonight, for me, for you, is get curious. Get curious. Got a hand up here, need a microphone.
Story about the hummingbird.
Oh, okay, I'll wrap with that, but let's get one more audience question, then I'll tell you about the hummingbird.
Because that was the problem with the cover, so I want to tell you about that.
I think Dolores was actually much kinder in how she described my cover recommendation, but she obviously didn't like it.
Supposing I was one of those broken women, and you approached me and I tell you to get the hell out of here. I don't want your help. What would you think?
I would be even more attracted. Some of y'all know this story. Yes. You're so broken you don't know you need my help, honey.
Well, I don't. This has happened to me where a friend tried to help me, but I saw some other things. She was trying to help herself more than she was trying to help me, and I sensed that, and I did not want it.
Right. Yes. And that's the awareness. That's the awareness. When we see it, okay, if it's true that Spirit is responding perfectly all the time, and you were given the power to say no, then you were seeing it clearly enough so Spirit could deliver a different response. That's what happened to me in Austin, Texas. I saw it clearly enough. I could see where the train went. I knew what was going to happen. And I said, I'm out. Spirit gave me all the energy necessary for the problem to be solved. It's all about observation. You're absolutely on the mark and the willingness to go there. So I'm just about out of time. So I want to tell the hummingbird story because it is on the cover of my book. It was actually on the cover of my first book. It was actually my recommendation for the cover of this book, which Dolores, you can ask her about that. She'll be honest with you. The story of the hummingbird, and it's central to all the work I do, is actually in I've actually just recently moved to Greenville, South Carolina, but I was in Albuquerque, New Mexico for 18 years. And there's a story that's told in New Mexico about hummingbirds that show up on back porches and bang on windows. And for a long time, science talked about how that was aggression, because lots of times it was male rufous hummingbirds. And they said that's aggression. And then somebody did a little more study, and they found out that in some cases, maybe many cases, in fact, it was the same hummingbird that had been there last year. And it had just flown between 3,000 and 6,000 miles, nonstop, no potty breaks, no stops for food. It's in your backyard because it knows exactly where it is. It is famished, kind of like a college student coming home. It knows who's in charge of the feeder. It knows what needs doing. Knock, knock. I'm back. Get on it. Get the feeder up. I'm hungry. It's 5,000 miles later. And so my proposition in this book and all the work I do is if the divine order put that kind of a guidance system in a bird that weighs 1/4 of an ounce, the same guidance system that has been put in things like salmon, nobody knows how their programming works, the same thing that causes a baby to instantly apparently recognize a smile and round eyes, it is not hard to imagine that you have a perfect guidance system in you. It's not hard to imagine that at all. The only question to be asked is, what's getting in the way? What's getting in the way? That's the take-home lesson. What's getting in the way? Ego in its many forms. Get curious, see if you can get a glimpse at it. It happens all the time when we get lucky, and then when you turn it into a discipline, a practice of looking wherever the rocky road is and asking the question, if it's true that Spirit is responding perfectly, and if it's true that there's something moving up the curve, better and more glorious, leading to a place where I get to just sit and be a part of the divine design, then I wonder what the block in my eye is. I wonder what's standing in my way. I wonder why it would be showing up the way it's showing up. And stay curious. Writing helps. See what shows up. I promise you one thing. It is designed for your growth and development, no exceptions. And it's a perfect design. It's either moving you up to greater manifestation, or it's letting you experience the discomfort of the mischief of the ego so that you can see the block, so that it can be removed, so you can be transported. No exceptions. So as you go about these next couple days, as you run into a little bit of rough road, which I'm sure some of you will, get curious. Ask the question, and see what unfolds. Perfect design, including me being here, which is a great delight. And again, Dolores, thank you for having me.
What if you could help others to find the power to heal themselves, physically, emotionally, and spiritually?
When I started teaching my classes, it was in 2002, and I was just doing the past life regressions and contacting the subconscious part. But then as the time went on and we found how powerful this was and what we could do with it, a lot of the students began saying, you know, advanced past life regression doesn't really tell what it's all about. This is so much more than that. We think you should change the name. So it was a few years ago we decided to change the name to Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique. And this is the healing technique that we've now been teaching it, well, since 2002, that's 12 years.
What if you could time travel with them, visit mythical places or angelic realms, other worlds, other galaxies? Help others to speak to their higher selves. You can. Dolores has taught thousands of people from across the world how to use QHHT, and now you can learn her method by going directly to DoloresCannon.com. And don't forget to mention the discount code MORETALKS.